am so happy to be back. For those of you who don't know where I went, I was in Ireland for a couple of weeks, and so I want to thank Reverend Mary, who is speaking at another church today, but we'll just have that on record, and Scott for speaking for me for the last 2 Sundays, and I want to say it's really, really great to be back, where our vision is awakening personal transformation, and our mission is teaching tools for positive change. That's where you are today at the Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living, and it feels so good for me, and I trust it does for you too. Our theme this year continues to be Your Joyous Life, and that's what everything is geared for, is wherever you are in your joy spectrum to kind of push it up a little or a lot. We're finishing up. This August had 5 Sundays in it. This is the last Sunday, and we're working through this book, The Happiness Project, and this month our theme is about eternity. So we turn that into the theme being eternity is now, and now, and now. So actually, eternity is forever. Eternity is the past, the present, and the future. The future is, or the eternity is here and there, anywhere, in every single dimension. And so you can't leave it. That's the idea. You're here in eternity. You can't get out of it. You're on the eternity train forever. How does that feel? We can't grok that. So we just know that we are immersed in forever. So the goal is really to touch eternity. So taking this whole month of what we have done with eternity, I want to say that for me it means that the immortal part of us touches the eternal part of God, and we know it is the same. It's kind of like namaste. The God in me speaks to the God in you, and we know it's the same. So the immortal part of us reaches to the eternal part of God, and we know that that's one and the same. And when we touch eternity, we can feel that oneness, and it feels comfortable. It doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel too mysterious. It doesn't feel like over the top so we can never understand it. It just feels like we're home. And so what it does for me is that when I know that I am part of eternity, I have no fear of mistakes. I have no fear of death. I have no fear of lost chances, because I know that I am in this oneness with God, and it basically is all good. So the title of the talk today is We Belong to Eternity. I want to draw your attention to Kathy Fowler's wonderful altar. And there are several infinity symbols. Oh, the infinity symbols became the headdresses of the angels. That's beautiful. So there are infinity symbols, there's grace, there's oneness, there's God on this altar, and it reminds us of the never-ending quality of eternity. So at this point, I want to remind you that as far as I think of this philosophy, we have 2 main lessons. And a lot of the time in Sundays and in classes, we are talking about the mastery. I did this book because there's only 2 things to talk about, oneness and mastery. So mastery is about how to use the creative law correctly or to our benefit and to the benefit of everybody else. It's how to think properly so that we create our life in harmonious ways. And so there are skills and a lot of things that we do and we change our mind, and we work with what's called our consciousness. The other piece is oneness. Now, there are skills associated with oneness too, but they're a little more amorphous, and it's more a feeling state, not so much to do, but a contemplation of oneness with God. I've got 2 quotes that explain the difference. This is one from Einstein, and this explains or exemplifies what mastery is about. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So the skill set is learning how to think differently. So that's mastery. And here's what we're working on this month, which is oneness. This is from William Blake. I am in you and you in me, mutual in divine love. So it's a very different feeling, but they support one another, of course. They support each other. The more we feel oneness, the more we believe that the creative law works, because that's part of the oneness, and the more that our life is to our liking and we feel blessed and blessed and blessed and grateful, then it's the easier it is to feel our oneness with the infinite presence. So it all works together. You should definitely sign up for a class. I just returned from Ireland. I actually spent about a day and a half with my daughter in New York City on the way back. I got home last night, and so I have had a week or 10 days of ancient sacred sites, which are so much a part of my path because they serve me in my touching eternity. So when I say the title here is We Belong to Eternity, the way that I move into that deeper and deeper and deeper is that I find more and more and more and more things to feel familiar with. The easy thing is that when I'm at an airport, often I think I know everybody. Have you ever had that experience? It's like, oh, where have I seen him? Oh, where have I seen her? Oh gosh, you know. Now, where I know that person. I don't know any of them, but they look familiar to me so that I feel kind of at one with them. It's very nice because I'm already happy about being on vacation. So, not that I don't love here. I do love here. So I want to read to you a little paragraph from John O'Donoghue. John O'Donoghue is Ireland's poet laureate. Very, very wise, very, very mystical. He's kind of like Ernest Holmes in that when I read a paragraph, I wonder why he indented where he did, because he just meanders all over the place. But this is an actual story. I remember as a child discovering the echo of sound. It was the first time that my father took me up the mountain to herd the cattle. As we passed a limestone cliff, he called out to the cattle in the distance. His call had barely ended when it was copied exactly and sent forth again by the stone. It was a fascinating discovery. I tried out my own voice, and the echo returned faithfully every time. It was as if the solid limestone mountains had secret hearing and voice. Their natural stillness and silence suddenly broke forth in an exact mimic of the human voice, indicating that there is a resonant heart in the depths of silence. The stone responds in a symmetry of sound. Hearing one's echo out among the lonely mountains seems to suggest that one is not alone. Landscape and nature know us, and the returning echo seems to confirm that we belong here. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? So, the idea of being comfortable in eternity is that we belong here. We belong wherever we are. There is a harmony with our being and the universe of which we are a part. And ideally, through spiritual practice, we know how to restore it when it falls apart. More than that, even more than our personal life, I believe that there has been a resonance forever. And through the trajectory of our own life, we see harmony. Even in the times when we felt not connected, we can see, looking back, that everything had a purpose, that we were divinely guided the whole way. Even the worst times in our life, God was right with us, offering us the next step, the next path. And not only that, not only can we see harmony and belonging throughout the trajectory of our own life, but we can see it when we go to ancient places. This is what I love about my kind of travel. When we go to ancient places, we can see it through history and prehistory. We know that God has always been, and we are one with that presence forever through history, and all of our kin are one with that presence through history. So the value of travel is that, for me, is I belong here, because I can feel my connection to everything that went before. I can find commonality everywhere I look. And the more times we feel moments of feeling at home, the more we are at home in eternity. Can you follow that? It's kind of poetic, you know, because that's what oneness is. You kind of talk around it because it's a feeling state and it's really hard to put into logical words. So the lesson is really about at home in eternity. That's what I want to talk about today. I have 2 points to make. The first is that everything is familiar. And within everything is familiar, I have 3 wonderful stories from this trip, probably the parts of it that meant the most to me, because I felt eternity in each one of these places. So you ready to go on a little travelogue with me? Great. Okay, so the first is a picture of a postage stamp that is about the Ggcsl fields. I had to do this PowerPoint from overseas. So what I did was I sent Mary the pictures that I found on the internet rather than my own photographs, but this is perfect for what I want to say. So you have here, oopsie, wait, okay, wrong one. All right, here you have modern fields. Here you have ancient fields, the Ggcsl fields. Here you have a stone wall, and I'm going to tell you the story of all of this. And here you have the timeline. 3000 BC is 5,000 years ago. Okay, so we're going to start even earlier than that. And this is pronounced Ggcsl, the Ggcsl fields in County Mayo. And Mayo is way to the northwest. So this is north up here. This boundary here between land and sea is actually on a peninsula that kind of goes like this, and it faces to the north. Okay, everybody with me? All right. So about 10,000 years ago is when the last ice age receded. During the ice age, all of Ireland was under ice. And so when the ice receded, the land sort of popped up, and we had nomads from the mainland come over to England and then come over to what became Ireland. They were hunter-gatherers. They were Neolithic people. They were not the stone builders. They were the stargazers, and they made pots, and that's all we really have of them is pots. So about 6,200 years ago, the climate changed. And it became, I mean, we're concerned about global warming now. It was really warm in Ireland. It actually was a lot like Portugal. And so from about 6,200 years ago to about 5,500 years ago, there were farmers that came and kind of joined in, or maybe pushed out, the hunter-gatherers. These farmers were the stone builders. They were the ones that placed stones on top of each other and made the big cairns and made the big standing stones. And they came probably from the mainland, although why they went to Western Ireland to do this, I have no idea. But nonetheless, they became the first people to bring agriculture to Ireland. And they grew crops, and they had cattle. And they built these stone fences. This diagram here is a diagram of the stone fences and the resulting fields that were from 6,200 years ago. These little circles here are pens for calves. And we know that from looking at, you know, the ground and analyzing the ground. So they farmed and made these fields 6,200 years ago, and then about here, maybe a little bit before here, which is 5,000 years ago, there was a cataclysmic event. They think it was probably a volcano, a big, big, big volcano. That you've heard of the mini ice age in Europe. This is the mini ice age. So in this mini ice age, there was ash that covered the stone fences. This ash, plus the cooling of the climate, and it became wetter, started creating the bogs. And this is the bog. The bog builds itself about a meter every 1,000 years. So the bog started building its, and the farmers were long gone. So the bog kept the stone fences underneath and everything else. This is why sometimes bog people are found, you know, that they're mummified in the bogs. So nobody knew that this existed until very, very recently. Recently, like in 1990s, some farmer dug up something that looked really, really old and told the authorities, and they're very proud of their Neolithic sites in Ireland. And so they started doing this very technologically savvy thing called prodding. Prodding is where you take a big, long piece of metal, kind of like the stuff that they build, you know, skyscrapers with, and you poke it in the bog. And then you step, and then you poke it in the bog again, and you poke it until it runs into something. Now, if it goes down, 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 you know there's no fence there, but every once in a while, it doesn't go as far. And they mapped this entire Ggcsl complex by prodding the bog. Now, what is so amazing to me is that these fields look just like these fields that you fly over when you go to London. When the airplane flies from here to London, it goes over Ireland, and you look down, and here are these rectangular fields that go from one end of the country to the other. Every single inch of Ireland, except the mountains and the forests, are in these rectangular fields that are still used to keep cattle and to grow crops. This is amazing to me, that in 5,000 years, nothing has changed. Of course, everything has changed, but nothing has changed. It's all familiar. You see it once, you see it again and again and again. Everything is connected. Another little excerpt from John O'Donohue. No one was created in isolation. When we become isolated, we are prone to being damaged. Our minds lose their flexibility and natural kindness. We become vulnerable to fear and negativity. When I see something like this, I know I am connected. So there was a story about a woman in a village who lived next to an ancient graveyard, one of these places where it was a sacred graveyard from 5,000 years ago. And there was digging in there, and she said, you know, I don't want you digging in the graves of my ancestors. You digging there is exactly like you going over in this graveyard and digging up my Aunt Hattie, who I knew. Because she was connected. And us country of immigrants, we're connected too when we see something like this. Everything is familiar. So the next story, do you love this? I love this so much. Okay, this is Sister Mary Menahan and the Dalai Lama. Okay, so Sister Mary is a Brigantine sister. She is a part of a subdivision of the Catholic Church. I never was Catholic, so I don't know exactly how to call it, but their saint, their patron, their beloved is Saint Bridget. Bridget took her name from the Celtic goddess, whose name was also Bridget. It's back in time around 500 AD, after Patrick, but not very much after St. Patrick, when Bridget became not only a saint, but a bishop, sort of by accident, because the old guy that actually was christened by St. Patrick was kind of giving her her vows, and he read the wrong page. So instead of making her a nun, he made her a bishop, you know, right out of the gate. So So there are all of these miracles that, let me read you a cute little part in a book about Saint Bridget. The miracle stories include the marvelous, the trivial, and the entertaining. They also reflect the timeless realities and problems of daily life, little different as they are from our needs. These are stories of sight. There are stories of sight given to a person born blind, of a deaf mute finding speech, of water being turned into ale. They turned it into ale in Ireland. We can smile with the audience on hearing that a wild boar becomes domesticated among Bridget's pigs. A cow produces quantities of milk to order. A pack of wolves round up a herd of fat pigs for the convenience of the saint. Farmhands saved Bridget's harvest dry while it poured rain on the neighbors, and that a scrupulous dog that stole the cooked bacon refrained from eating it and kept it safe until it was found. Those are some of the miracles attributed to Saint Bridget. But there was another one that I want to talk about, because as the story goes, so here's this woman who created an abbey, a double abbey for men and for women. I mean, she is as big in these sisters' minds as St. Patrick is. So she goes to the chieftain of the land, and she says, I want land for an abbey. And the chieftain kind of laughs at her and says, I'll give you as much land as your cloak can cover when you throw it on the ground. So she takes off her cloak and she throws it on the ground, and the cape billows and billows and billows and billows and billows out until acres have to be given to her for her abbey. So that's the miracle that is actually duplicated by these girls. So 5 years ago was when I first met the Brigantine sisters and Sister Mary. And at the time, they had no abbey, they had no business office, they had a flat, they had an apartment. And they had kind of a meditation space in their living room, and then they had kind of a chapel in one of the bedrooms that had the eternal flame of Bridget that has been, I mean, it's been kept alive now for a few hundred years, but back in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 900s, it was kept alive for 1,000 years. But anyway, it was rekindled by these girls. And so this was a little chapel in a bedroom of this flat that we visited the last time, and it was just the most sacred experience. And Mary told beautiful, beautiful stories about Bridget. And she said, we are in the process of gaining some land for a wonderful building that we're going to own. That was 5 years ago. This trip, we visited Solis Brita, which is this amazing building built in the shape of a Bridget's cross. If you can imagine, it has 4 wings to it. $4 million of building, and it won the award for the best green building in all of Ireland because you turn this building on and then it maintains exactly the same temperature year-round. And it does this all green, which is so magnificent because one of the values of the Brigantine Order is the stewardship of the earth. So this man, and when she told us the story this time of, about halfway through the fundraising for this building, which was $4 million, was the downturn in economy, bad downturn in economy in Ireland, and the donations stopped coming, but they had orders out and they didn't know what they were gonna do, and she just said, well, we thought we might have to go to jail. That's what they would have to do. But the money came in, the building was built, it won an award, it is absolutely gorgeous. The Dalai Lama visits, and that is the equivalent, I'm telling you, it is the equivalent of the miracle of St. Bridget throwing her cloak down and having it expand. Everything is familiar. It all happens again. And God supports us in every single thing that we do. So the last story is about this monastery and abbey called Glendalough. Glendalough was a monastery from around the 400 AD, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 AD, where the monks copied every book that they could put their hands on that they got from Europe. This was at the time when Europe was crumbling due to the Roman Empire crumbling, and everybody was fighting. And it was the Dark Ages in Europe. But in Ireland, these sweet little monks in their scriptoriums were painting illuminated scripts of every single book that they could get their hands on. And so this is such a peaceful place, dedicated to St. Kevin. This is another. St. Patrick, St. Bridget, St. Kevin. We met them all. So this tower, it's called a round tower, and there are like 40-some pretty complete round towers in Ireland, and another 40 that are disintegrating. Nobody really knows for sure what these round towers are for. They're hollow. There is a door usually about 30 feet up that you get to by a ladder, and then there are more ladders inside so that you can go to the top. But what you do with it, I mean, there wasn't places for storing grain. The party line is that they were bell towers, but none of them have any fixtures for holding a bell. So why in the world the monk would climb up, all of this way to ring a handbell is pretty much of a mystery. So there's another theory. So the other theory is that these are built of paramagnetic rocks, which have weak magnetic properties that pull down solar energy from the sun, and distribute it into the earth. Now, one of the things that sort of supports this idea is that around these round towers were where every monastery had their vegetable gardens. And there's something, and another feature is that this is a country that, since the change of weather, has rain about 250 days a year, if you can imagine it. Not a lot of sunshine for growing vegetables. And so the theory is that this paramagnetic rock enables the solar energy that is needed for plant growth to be pulled down and distributed around the round tower so that the vegetables can be grown. And there are people who are doing experiments around this very thing in England and Ireland now, of building little towers in their little plots with basalt or some paramagnetic rock in it. So it's a mystery. But even the mysteries are familiar, because some of the greatest stories that I love about the ancient world is how our ancestors worked with the energy of the earth, the energy of the sun, to navigate over great, great expanses of terrain that looked exactly the same. And in the mist, it really looked exactly the same. And so our ancestors knew something about energy and participating with energy that we do not know right now. But I believe that we can explore. But what I want us to realize is that even the mysteries are familiar. They follow a familiar pattern, in this case, of working with energy. So what this says to me is that everything is connected to something else, and it is all supportive. That God made this world for us, and it is holy through and through, and that we are an integral part of it. And we can imagine that if it is true of this world, that it is true of eternity, that every world is made to support the creations that reside there, and that creation, anywhere it is found, is unconditionally supported in this dimension or in any other. I love this from D.H. Lawrence. When I hear modern people complain of being lonely, then I know what has happened. They have lost the cosmos. And what these stories, what these experiences do for me is to re-find the cosmos and the cosmos in here. So, back to this. We're at home in eternity. Everything is familiar. One more point. Might as well be happy. So we're divinely supported by God. We're one with God. Our kin is one with us and one with God for eternity. We live each day with the choice of looking for the good and finding it or not. and complaining about what we can't find. And that's about mastery. You know, what we look at is what we find more of. And in this world, there are a lot of people that look to the difficult. They look to the separation. They look to the differences. And they make war about the differences. And that brings a lot of suffering. And so there is an argument that happiness is frivolous in a world where there is so much suffering. But actually, there's a great big part in our yearly book about that, in this chapter, where she says, the belief that unhappiness is selfless and happiness is selfish is misguided. It is more selfless to act happy. It takes energy, generosity, and discipline to be unfailingly lighthearted. So I want to give us all permission to be lighthearted. You know, there is no more lighthearted people than the Irish. And there is no people on earth that have suffered more than the Irish. I mean, starvation and conquest and, you know, Vikings and everything throughout their history. And they are so jolly. They are so dear. They are so funny. They make jokes on themselves all the time. And so I concur with the Irish and with our author that we might as well be happy. So I want to conclude with one more story, just because I wanted to get it in here. So this is the conclusion. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else I've said, but it's a great story. So we were at Bridget's Well. And Bridget's Well has a sort of a little parkway, and it has a well, and it has a little bubbling brook from the well, and it has trees that have these claudies on them. These are little torn pieces of rag that people put on the trees with their prayers, and so we did as well, of course. And so what Glenn, the guide who's very into earth energy, he said, you know, this holy well has had healings associated with it for 5,000 years. This is St. Bridget's Well. The water always runs. It's always pure. It's always beautiful. It's always healing. And these trees that line this little parkway draw up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gallons of this holy water every day. Draw up the water from their roots, through their trunks, out into their branches and into their leaves, and then they respire the water out into the air. So he said, as we are next to this well, we are being showered with holy water from the trees all the time. And that made so much sense to me. That's why we all love beautiful gardens so much. Because there is obviously love that goes into the gardens. And the plants draw up the love with the water that is lovingly watered, and then respire it into the air. And so we walk through this fountain of healing love every time we are in a well-tended garden. That's the conclusion. So, going deeper, every moment and circumstance of my life is perfect for my soul. If you can go there, you will be in eternity, and you will be eternally joyful. And so for the inner work, I'm going to start with one more blessing from John O'Donohue. So I invite you within. Blessed be the longing that brought you here and that quickens your soul with wonder. May you have the courage to befriend your eternal longing. May you enjoy the critical and creative companionship of the question, who am I? And may it brighten your longing. May a secret providence guide your thought and shelter your feeling. May your mind inhabit your life with the same sureness with which your body belongs to the world. May your soul be as free as the ever-new waves of the sea. May you succumb to the danger of growth. May you live in the neighborhood of wonder. May you belong to love with the wildness of dance. May you know that you are ever embraced in the kind circle of God. Blessed be.